Hi folks, Leigh Diffey along with NBC Sports SportsCar experts Brian Till, Calvin Fish with you. We are talking IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship at the legendary Watkins Glen International for the famed Salins 6 Hours of the Glen. It's coming up this weekend. You'll see it live on NBC at noon Eastern, all the way through to 3 o'clock, and at the halfway point make the switch over to Peacock, where we will finish the second half of this legendary 6-hour race. Fellas, really interesting time in sports car racing at the moment. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were racing on those tight streets of downtown Detroit, and then for a certain portion of the field, they headed off to France for 2 weekends at Le Mans. Now they're returning, and we go from the shortest track on the schedule in Detroit to one of the larger tracks in Watkins Glen International. I know that the three of us love this, but many, many millions more do as well. Cal, what makes the Glen so special for you?
Well, I relate it to the US Open golf last weekend. This is a big boy circuit. It's a major. It's one of the Michelin Endurance Cup rounds. And if you make a mistake here and get in the rough, you're going to struggle to recover and get your round back on track. So it's a really important point in this championship. There's only 3 rounds to go in the GTP class when we leave here after the checkered flag. So for the pursuers, they've got to get going. And for the championship leaders, they want to try and consolidate here on an amazing circuit.
BT, how about you? The Glen, what does it mean? What thoughts does it evoke straight away?
Well, I mean, Calvin and I both have memories of driving there personally, but just from a fan and from a broadcasting standpoint, it has everything, and your car has to have everything there. I think that's the thing that makes this racetrack so unique. High speed, long flowing corners where the car has to have good stability. It's got to have good straight line speed out of turn one and down that back straightaway. And yet there's some slow speed sections of the racetrack where it's got to put the power down well. So you really have to have a car that does everything. And as Calvin said, this place is old school. It will bite you. Put a wheel wrong, especially when you get down to the end of the back straightaway and you head down into the inner loop. There's really no margin for error down there. And with 4 classes back together, it's going to be super tight.
And that's a really good point, mate, because it's the biggest field since we saw at Sebring. So there's some 56 cars entered. And LMP2, Cal, is back. This is a tight championship, just a couple of points in it. And we haven't seen them in quite some time. So it's going to be great to have them back in all 4 classes on the track.
Yeah, 99 days since they last saw action at Sebring. Some of the drivers obviously over at Le Mans success there, but there's so much star power in that class this year. We've talked about it all year long with guys like Sebastian Bourdais, Dane Cameron. Then you add to the mix Tom Dillman, who's coming off a victory at Le Mans. So it's exciting. I mean, the cars are spectacular. Brian talked about what you need here at Watkins Glen with these long flowing corners with those LMP2 cars. They have massive amounts of downforce. They make some really bold moves in traffic through the GT field. So they're always exciting to watch. And, coming from Le Mans, some people are exhausted. It's been a big month. The teams, especially, who really did the combination of running at the Motor City in Detroit, then over to Le Mans immediately for the test week, then the Le Mans race, and then chasing back here to get prepared for this big 6-hour race. It can be euphoric if you've had win and success there or a podium, but for others, they're dragging their tails a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how some of the groups respond this weekend.
How do they rebound, Brian? How do you stay up and stay energized and focus again for one of the last remaining true endurance races on the season?
Well, I think if your driver's suit smells like champagne from France, it's probably pretty easy to be energized, right? You're still riding that high, and that jet lag may not seem so bad. But if you're a team that went over there and had massive disappointment, think about Wayne Taylor Racing. They were the first GTP car out of the Le Mans 24 hours. And we know about their struggles here in IMSA this year. For those guys, they've got their tail between their legs. And as Calvin very well pointed out, the season for GTP is running out. Only 3 races to go. When you leave here, you've got to make a mark. And the mark you want to make is by being on the podium, being on the top step of the podium. You don't want to make a mark on one of the walls around Watkins Glen International. So, yeah, some of them are energized, and others, they've got absolutely nothing to lose.
And speaking of those drivers and teams feeling euphoric about great performances at the 24 hours of Le Mans, into Europole winning LMP2 in France with Nick Yellerly and Tom Dillman. They'll be coming back to race at the Glen, so they'll have big smiles on their faces. And Cal, it was a huge weekend for AO Racing, just flying the stars and stripes so proudly, and they won their class, the Pro-Am class, within LMP2.
Yeah, just magic what that group is putting together. We've talked about Rexy and Roxy, their success in GTD Pro over the last couple of years. Well, finally, they get that breakthrough win for PJ Hyatt in an LMP2 machine alongside Dane Cameron, four-time IMSA Championship winner. He won the Rolex last year with the Porsche Penske squad, and now he adds another massive win to his resume. So he's really pumped. I texted with him after the event. He just said, I can't believe it. So, and Louis Dalatraz, he was in that car as well, and he's going to return to Wayne Taylor Racing. Certainly that group collectively, it was a big effort to get over there for the first time. They didn't get the result or the performance they were looking for, but maybe Dalatraz within that camp will get everyone ramped up a little bit and see if they can get back into the fast lane here this weekend.
Dane Cameron stood on the top step of the podium at the Salem 6 Hours of the Glen a year ago, but racing in LMP2 now. But Brian, we should switch gears to GTP. When we did our review of the race on the streets of Detroit, we mentioned importantly that Penske string of victories was snapped with that real thriller in the Motor City. What do you think the big headlines, and what should we watch for? What should the folks watch for this weekend in the Premier category?
I think you're going to look for the rebound of Porsche Penske Racing, because they did not have a good weekend in the IndyCar series this past weekend. Le Mans, they came up short. Porsche ran well there, but not well enough. And they still have those wounds that they're looking from Detroit. So they're going to put their head down and focus forward, try to put all the noise behind them and focus forward. There has been a little bit of BOP change in GTP. Acura got a little bit of weight, I think about 6 kilograms. The BMW got a fair amount of weight. I know they're not going to want to see that, but I'm not sure how much that BOP is going to really come into play at Watkins Glen. I think a lot of it is about dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and not in GTP, but in LMP2. That's exactly why AO Racing has found the success that they have found, both in their LMP2 project and in their GTD project. It's all about making sure you've gotten everything buttoned up and you go do your job.
The last 4 years at the Salem 6 Hours of the Glen have given us 4 different winners and 4 different manufacturers standing on the top step of the podium. But Cadillac has not been one of those. The GM marque hasn't won since 8 years ago. That was back in the days of Christian Fittipaldi and Joao Barbosa. But interestingly, Philippe Albuquerque. So we'll see Philippe racing again this weekend. Do you think Caddy can get back on top and get that elusive victory?
I think there's certainly potential for it. When we reflect back to Detroit, they finished runner-up. They had the win in their hands with Ricky Taylor, then Renger van der Zandt made that bold move down into turn 1 to steal the victory away. But for Action Express Racing, they've had good results over there historically. I think they were very fast at Le Mans. I mean, Jack Aiken actually had the fastest time in the qualifying sessions. He wasn't in the Hyperpole shootout there, which went to the Jota team sweep in the front row. But they had a lot of pace there. It was a really strong weekend for them. So their return, they're a great group. We talk about how exhaustive it can be, but they've done it before. They did it last year. So I think they'll return here and be ready to go. And I think they're chomping at the bit. They have to get a victory here to have any outside chance at this championship. I think at this point forward, it's going to be all about getting that Cadillac to victory lane for the very first time this season. I think they're definitely in the mix this weekend.
All right, Brian, let's talk GTD Pro and GTD. What are the big headlines? GTD Pro is pretty close in championship points-wise.
Super close. And we were just talking about Cadillac winning and how important that would be for GM. Take a look at GTD Pro, where Ford, you think about how much they struggled last year. Well, both of those Ford Mustangs have won races this year. And that's pretty impressive stuff. Neither Corvette has. So that GM Ford battle continues in GTD Pro as you head to Watkins Glen. And they have had battles there at Watkins Glen in both IMSA competition, Trans Am over the years. And trust me, that Ford victory at Detroit and GTD Pro did not sit well with the GM brass right there in the shadow of the GM Rensen. So I think Corvette really needs to dig deep. Antonio Garcia, they are right there in second in the championship. They've not won a race, but they've been remarkably consistent. But I think if you're going to win this GTD Pro championship, you're going to have to find victory lane.
What grabs your attention, Cal, in the two GTD categories?
Well, I think certainly Corvette have been knocking on the door, 3 podiums, sit there second in points, and it's certainly tight right behind Lauren Heinrich and company. But I think that Ford story is remarkable. It's great to see that Ford-Chevy rivalry resuming this year. A big turnaround for that whole group in the off season, and for them to win on the streets of Detroit. I mean, talking to that group prior to the weekend, they said top 5, top 6, and they went out and dominated it with the front row sweep, and then winning the race with Sebastian Priaulx and Mike Rockenfeller. And they now come to a racetrack where they thought they'd be really strong. So there's been a few subtle tweaks in GTD ranks with the BOP as well, but I think they're now licking their chops at some of these tracks that they're going to, and they sit third in the points right now. They're definitely a factor in this GTD Pro Championship. In GTD, Winward Racing, what a group. 2 wins on the year, so consistent, never seem to put a foot wrong. They do all of the due diligence in terms of getting their crew to the race shop during the week, practicing and rehearsing their pit stops. So I don't expect them to miss a beat this weekend, and should be one of the favorites again.
It's another round of the Michelin Endurance Cup as well. And look, this place is so beloved, racing on the streets back in the 40s, racing at Watkins Glen International since the mid-50s. This is truly a special place and significant for sports cars as well. You'll see it at noon Eastern on NBC on network television, and then from 3 onwards on Peacock. In fact, it's streaming the entire time on Peacock, so however you want to watch the Salem 6 Hours of the Glen, we'll be bringing it to you live this weekend with lots of excitement. Have a great rest of the week, fellas. We'll see you soon. Hi, folks. Leigh Diffey from NBC Sports here. If you truly enjoyed what you just watched, you can get more news, interviews, and highlights by subscribing to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube page. You can get it all, so go for it.